Hey guys, it's Frederik from the FWX podcast. I want to talk to you about a franchise that I haven't covered yet, which also has a new recent movie in the theaters, and that movie in itself is this one, Ballerina, with Ana de Armas as the lead character, Eve Macaro. And so this is part of the John Wick franchise. That's I get a picture right here with all those movies. And Ballerina is part of that same franchise. And I want to talk movie by movie, episode by episode, about those movies. About the story and the characters. I'm also going to bring up pictures with the casts of the movies. But let's start first and foremost with episode number 1 with the first John Wick movie. Here's the poster. And of course, this is all with the amazing Keanu Reeves as John Wick. Okay. Before we start, I'm gonna have to give you the disclaimer first. On occasion, I will flub a word, because that happens to the best of us. I might also swear. That might happen or not. Depends on the moment and where we're at. Also, my text is on the screen, which means that the screen will get brighter and I will get brighter as a result. So let's dive into the world of John Wick with the first movie. And we find John Wick in New York City as he is grieving because he has just lost his wife, Helen. And she, upon her death, had arranged for a puppy to be delivered to him so then he can deal with her death. And this is a beagle dog. So, by that phrase alone, just briefly in between, you can tell that I'm not a dog person. But I do know what a beagle looks like, so I can understand how this could help. Okay. And we cut to a couple days later where John is at a gas station and he has driven there with his car, a 1969 Boss 429 Mustang. And once again, you can tell by how I say that I don't know what kind of car that is, except that it is a Mustang. And at this gas station, he gets accosted by a group of Russian gangsters who are led by Iosef Tarasov. And Iosef Tarasov in this movie is played by this man, Alfie Allen, who played a very important role on the Game of Thrones series Theon Greyjoy. And also, fun little tidbit, he happens to have the same birthday as Sydney Sweeney, September 12th, which, funny enough, is a day before my birthday, September 13th. And so, Alfie plays this guy, Iosef Tarasov, and Iosef is at the same gas station with some friends of his, and they are trying to accost John because he has a sweet ride and they really, really want it, but they really fail into intimidating him to sell his car to them. And so John goes back home, and later that evening, at night when John is asleep, this group of guys, which are Russian gangsters by the way, they break into John's home, they assault him, they fight him, quickly learn that this is no ordinary man, and they steal a car, of course, which is what they wanted in the first place. And then, just to make things worse for John, they kill the beagle, the puppy, that he started to call Daisy. And so Iosef takes the Mustang to a chop shop, which is a business where they disassemble parts from cars and other motor vehicles. And so the owner of the shop is there, a guy named Aurelio, who in this movie is played by this guy, John Leguizamo. And he's done a ton of acting too. I know him best from his voice acting as Sid the Sloth in the Ice Age movies, and also Bruno from Encanto. And so John plays Aurelio, the owner of this chop shop, and he recognizes the car, the Mustang, as the guys, the Russians, really want the people at the shop to take off the identifying parts. There's some form of identification of John on there, and they want that away. And so Aurelio recognizes this car, and he says, "No, I'm not gonna let you do this." And John comes to John. I just said the same thing. Aurelio comes to John into his home, and he tells John that Iosef is the son of Viggo Tarasov, who, by the way, is played in this movie by this man, Michael Nyqvist, who I've talked about before, I think. Gonna bring up a picture for a second from a different franchise. I have to look this up for just a second. Just a moment. No, wait. Oh, yeah. I was right. So, Michael Nyqvist, I've talked about before in my Mission Impossible breakdown, because he plays the villain in the fourth movie there. Okay, so Aurelio says to John that Iosef is the son of Viggo, who is the boss of the Russian mafia in New York City. And as John comes to know about this, Viggo comes to know about John. And there's this amazing scene in this movie where Iosef meets with his father, with Viggo, and Viggo tells him about John Wick. And he tells him that John used to be a hitman who worked for the Russian mafia, and that he was an absolutely infamous fighter and killer. And in the criminal underworld, they knew him as the Baba Yaga. And Viggo literally calls him a man of focus, commitment, and sheer will. And of course, he says this in an accent, in a Russian accent. And this is an amazing scene in this movie, and the whole reason that's the whole reason why Iosef shouldn't have done that, because this man will tear you apart no matter what you do to him. And he also tells his son that the reason why the dog was there is that John fell in love with a woman, Helen, as a villain, and John really wanted out of the life of being a criminal hitman. And so Viggo gave him an impossible task so he could get out of the criminal underworld. But John succeeded in doing it, and so he was free to live with this woman, and they were married for a long, long time until she passed away. And John decides that we got back to John in his home, and he goes into one of the rooms of his house where he has a concealed stash from that old career, and he digs it back up. He had put that away. It really as really in the point of, I am done with that life. I no longer want to do it. I wanted just to live my life with my wife. And so he digs all of that back up. He digs up all his weaponry, but also some interesting new things that we learn for this movie and for this franchise, and that there's a whole system that is built up for those who are of the criminal underworld, and that includes golden coins specific to the trade of criminal warfare, basically. And John gets a call from Viggo, who really wants to make amends and not have to suffer the wrath of the Baba Yaga that John used to be. And so we get an amazing scene, or scenes rather, of a hit squad that is sent to John's home. And John Wick shows off just exactly why he was named Baba Yaga. And he kills this entire squad, one man for the other, piece by piece. And this leads Viggo to put a bounty on John's head. And it is not just any bounty, it's a $2 million bounty. $2 million bounty. I'm saying dollars, of course, because currency is apparently very important in this world. And he enlists somebody else to take care of John, and someone that John used to know from that old life, and that is Marcus. And Marcus is played by the incredible Willem Devoe, right here. Also, he has a mustache in this. Okay, and so John goes to a place in New York City called the Continental, which is a very luxurious hotel that is sort of like a neutral ground for people from the criminal underworld, where doing criminal business is deeply forbidden to do. And John knows the owner of this hotel, and he's played in this movie and all the other movies by the incredible Ian McShane, who plays Winston, the hotel's owner. And he's an old friend of John's. And just a bit more information. There's one Continental in New York, and there are many others throughout the whole world. For instance, and this is just a little tidbit for later, when we get to the point of talking about the, for now, last movie, number 4, there is also one in Japan. In Osaka. Okay. I was remembering it because I saw the movie last night again. And so Winston tells John that Joseph is at a place called the Red Circle, which is a nightclub. And of course, John goes there to the Red Circle, and he infiltrates the place. and he comes face to face with Iosef. But he is attacked by one of not just Iosef's gang, but someone that looks over them, that is part of Figo's crew, a guy named Kirill, who was played in this movie by the actor known as Daniel Bernhardt, who I haven't seen, I think, in anything else. And so John needs to go back to the Continental because he got pretty hurt from this confrontation. And here we learn that some people really don't care about the rules. As while John is resting, there is someone that gets into his room. A woman who, when I say that, you automatically think, oh, this must be a prostitute or something like that. But actually, she is not. This woman is a killer herself, and she is Miss Perkins, and she's played in this movie by Adriana Palicki. I hope I say that right. Seems an easy enough name, but never know. So she plays Miss Perkins, and Miss Perkins gets into his room, and they fight. And John's old mentor, Marcus, again played by Willem Devoe, sees that they're fighting. Well, they aren't just... I'm misinterpreting this for a moment. So Miss Perkins is in John's room. She sneaks in, about to do something, and Marcus sees Perkins get in there, and he fires a shot into the room to alert John, who actually was asleep, but he manages to subdue her, despite being in quite a vulnerable position, being asleep. Which really shows off that John does not need a lot to fight and kill. And Perkins tells to John that Vigo, the head of the Russian mafia in New York, has now doubled the bounty for John. And so, in an effort for someone in the Continental to kill John. But of course, that is impossible to do because it is highly forbidden. And she also tells him that there is a high value stash of weaponry in a church close by. And so John has maintained, has kept Perkins under his control, and he hires somebody else named Harry. Oh, damn, I don't have a picture of this person. I'm gonna look up for a moment who it is, because I do think it was someone important. Just a second. A man named Clark Peters. Oh yeah, he's an older actor who plays Harry, a hitman that John knows. Luckily, I can tell you that I do kind of know him because I've seen him in... And also, he's been in some interesting movies, alright, like 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. But also, I'm gonna cut to... It's been in a ton of movies and TV series, but I know him best from a role in Person of Interest, where he played the leader of a faction that is important in that show. Okay, so let's continue here. Unfortunately, Perkins escapes from the bound. The I almost wanted to say bondage, but not in how you usually think about it. More like John had her subdued, and he got her locked. In other words, she was tied up. Is what I meant. That's what I meant. But she, of course, gets out and she kills Harry on her way out, escaping. And so John goes to the church, and here he destroys the things that Viggo had there, which was a lot of money, cash money, a lot of dollar bills, and some very extensive material that he was going to use to blackmail people. And so Viggo goes there after the John has taken care of that to check how much damage there is. But then as Viggo goes outside of the church after assessing just how much damage there is, John confronts him and his men with the weapons that he has. But unfortunately, he is hit by our guy Kirill's car, and he gets captured. John gets captured. And so here we get another scene where we have John on a chair, strapped, where he says the words of, "People say or ask that I'm back, and I've been thinking, yeah, I am back." And he says it a little bit more iconic than I just did, but that is a scene in this moment. And John tells Viggo that he will not stop until Iosef is dead, because of everything that he has done, coming into his home, taking his car, and especially killing that puppy, which gave John hope that he shouldn't be alone in his grief as he mourns for Helen. And we have Marcus here, played by Willem Devoe, of course, who intervenes, and he kills Carol. Yeah, and either one of them, I think it was John, friends Viggo to give up Iosef's location, as Iosef has been hiding out in a safe house. And Viggo gives up the location, and of course John goes to the safe house and kills Iosef. And Marcus tries to convince John after this that he should just go back to his everyday life. And we find that Perkins sees all of this. She's a witness. I think I'm misinterpreting things here, but I'll rephrase. So, John and Marcus meet up. Marcus says you should really return to your everyday life. And Perkins, played by Adriana Palecki, sees this, and she reveals to John that Marcus has been lying to you. He's been working for Viggo. and we get a scene where Viggo has Marcus tortured and killed, and Viggo then calls to John with all the details of what happens with Marcus, which gets John back into New York City because he lives outside of the city. And then we cut back to our man Winston, again played by Ian McShane, who has who executes Perkins for breaking the rule of the Continental in New York, and also tells John that Viggo is about to leave the city with a helicopter. And so John goes to New York Harbor with his car, and he fights with Viggo and ultimately gives him a wound that he will die from. And does die, of course. And then John has a video on his phone of his wife, which he watches. And that gives him the strength to go further. And so John breaks into an animal clinic nearby where he treats his wounds, and he adopts a new puppy that was supposed to be scheduled to be euthanized. And he and the dog go home. And that's where this movie ends. And so that's quite a lot for a first movie, but it's a pretty good one nonetheless. And yeah, I have not a lot more to say about this movie except that this sets off the sequel, number 2. And, well, I just want to say that compared to the newer ones, this one kind of dips. It's a little bit older, of course. It's from 2014 that it came out. But yeah, it's the start of a new franchise. And so I want to... I'm going to rephrase for just a second. So that is the first movie, and it's a pretty good one for a 2014 movie. And it sets off the sequels. Okay, and so this is where I want to leave you. Thanks for listening and watching me ramble about John Wick, the first movie. And you can like and subscribe, of course. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. You can also leave a comment if you like. You can have, if you have some tips for me, for instance. Okay, with all that out of the way, I'd like to thank you, and I'll see you in the next video where I'll be covering number 2. So, see you then. Bye.